Newburgh was first explored by Europeans when Henry Hudson stopped here in 1609. Later, it marked the base of operations for the Continental Army during the American Revolution. Centuries later, Newburgh enjoys a different claim to fame. It is a hub for motorcycle enthusiasts in America, a legacy that can be seen at Newburgh's Motorcyclepedia Museum.
The collection of motorcycles represents about 100 years of collecting, 60 years with my dad and about 40 with myself. My dad collected primarily or exclusively Indians, and myself probably the Harleys and the other brands, including the choppers.
Ted Doring began restoring and collecting bikes decades ago, a passion that led to one of the most impressive collections of motorcycles in the world.
So growing up on a farm, basically my dad had a lot of old motorcycles that not in great condition, but they did run. There's plenty of acres to ride around, so probably 10 or 12 years old riding, and then when I got to be in my teens, thinking, I want to quit college, that's not that much fun, started working around the motorcycle business. So total, there's over 500 motorcycles in number in the museum. They were in storage probably since the 1950s, 60s in garages or warehouses, and then in 2010 we decided to put them on public display.
Amazingly, the motorcycle timeline here stretches back to the 19th century. This powered tricycle was built by the French company de Dion-Bouton.
So this section would represent the origin of the motor bicycle, and later they called it the motorcycle. This is the oldest running motorcycle in North America, 1897.
In 1902, a similar model would be used to set a land speed record, as French racer Georges Osmond reached speeds of more than 109 kilometers per hour.
I think I waited many years or decades to find an example like this, so this is definitely, I would say, my favorite.
But the largest section of the museum honors Ted Doring's father and his interest in the Indian motorcycle.
This is the Indian timeline of the American-made Indians, made in Springfield, Massachusetts. Most people consider them the true Indians, beginning in 1901. Certainly, it's basically just a bicycle with a motor. They started with that, and then as time went on, it gets heavier. One of each year is represented. In 1904 was the first twist grip, which is on today's motorcycles, the same. They powered the ignition with a dry cell battery. It would take 3 batteries to fire the coil. For Indian, they kept growing pretty well, and their largest year was 1913. That was Indian's best year, before and after. So that probably was the pinnacle of the Indian company at 32,000 units. They did develop the first electric start motorcycle in 1914, and Harley didn't have an electric start until 1965. So I think they spent a lot of their money in developmental costs.
The Indian timeline continues to 1953, when the Springfield, Illinois factory ceased operations.
It just kept getting heavier and heavier, and then in the late 30s, early 40s, they developed the idea of the skirted fender. This is an example of the 1953 model. It's the last Indian produced in Springfield, Massachusetts. As you can see, they were way down in production. They went down to 500 units the last year. They're saying the last one was built in May of that year.
And while Indians were the favorite of Ted's father, Ted himself came on the scene when a different style bike was all the rage.
Okay, we're in Chopper City, the Chopper City Gallery. This would be an example of one of the earliest choppers, probably late 60s, a lot of handmade components. The rider would have did this himself, hand painted, a lot of just handiwork, and everything's his own, done on a relatively limited budget. So I think the choppers, as crude as they are, they pretty much define a pretty narrow section of time culturally. So this one would have been probably during Vietnam. Maybe he came back from Vietnam, but using car headlights. So he put a grenade for the foot peg, folds down, of course that's all welded by hand. So I think anything to get attention. But I think a lot of times too, people ask, oh, why do the motorcycles want to make so much noise? But it's kind of like when a cowboy rode into town, he would start shooting his pistol to say, hey, I've arrived. So the motorcycle guy has loud pipes, hey, I'm here.
Finally, downstairs, the museum is home to a wide variety of famous and historic bikes.
So now we're entering the downstairs gallery. This is the police section. So this is our local police motorcycle, City of Newburgh. They still use motorcycles. The police like motorcycles because they can get attention and people actually notice when they're directing traffic or trying to get things under control. So we have a Washington, D.C. police. This was from Richard Nixon's era, and I believe this escorted him out of the Capitol when he resigned. This is the JFK police bike from the motorcade. This is the pride of the collection, I think because of the history and the feelings where everybody understands that day in Dallas. It's actually in 1964. It was brand new in September of that year. They were radio controlled, and they were the first ones to actually send word back that the president was shot. We hope we can preserve it for another 50 years.